Good afternoon. How excited are you? We've got the cast and creators of The Prom. Okay. Good afternoon and welcome. I am thrilled to be sitting with the cast and creative team of one of this season's most important new musicals, The Prom. It tells the story of Emma, a lesbian high school student who was banned from bringing her closeted girlfriend Elisa to the prom in Edgewater, Indiana. The story catches the attention of 4 down-on-their-luck Broadway stars who travel to conservative Edgewater to rally on Emma's behalf to boost their own showbiz relevance under the guise of philanthropy. How many of you have seen the show already? So please welcome the cast and creators of The Prom. Brooks Ashmanskas, who plays Barry Glickman. Angie Schworer, who plays Angie. Christopher Sieber, who plays Trent Oliver. And the creators, Bob Martin, who wrote the book, along with Matthew Sklar, who wrote the music, and Chad Beguelin, who wrote the book with Bob Martin and the lyrics. The company of The Prom. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for doing this today.
Of course.
Well, my first question is for the creators. How did the 3 of you come together to write The Prom?
Matthew Sklar, would you like to answer that question?
Sure.
You're better with dates. He's better with
Okay,
dates.
all right, sure. In 2010, the 3 of us and Casey Nicholaw were working on the Broadway musical Elf. We had just done a workshop, and Jack Vertel...
Feel free to applaud for Elf.
Yeah, Elf. Elf.
Thank you.
Yes, very good. At that, right before we were going to go in rehearsals, but right after our workshop, Jack Vertel, who runs Encores, had this idea, and he thought it could possibly make a wonderful musical. So he asked Casey Nicholaw, because Jack had just seen the workshop of Elf, and he asked if he thought that it might be a good fit for the 4 of us, and we immediately just kind of thought it was a great idea, and that's kind of how it all started. You want to take it from there, Bob?
I think you said everything.
Oh, thanks.
Jack came up with a brilliant sort of comic premise that dealt with a very important contemporary issue, but added a whole shell of comedy that kind of makes the whole political message more appetizing. So we were extremely excited about it. We just jumped right in and began working on a treatment right away.
What was the collaboration like with the 3 of you working together?
Awful.
Yeah.
No, it was really great because we'd worked together before and obviously worked with Casey. And I think we trust each other so much. And I've been on other projects where, you're somebody will say, I think you could do a better lyric, or I think that line could be better. And you sort of, might be a little defensiveness or you don't agree. But with this team, we all trust each other. So the minute anybody says that to me, I think in my head, instead of like, oh, they think this is bad, I think to myself, no, they believe I can do better. So it's been sort of a dream to work with this creative team.
Yeah. Now, for the cast, you are all working at the top of your game. Talk about the roles that you play.
I play Barry Glickman, who is a Broadway actor, semi-star, I think, who, I always think of him as being just like sort of a veteran. He always is working on Broadway and has had some success there. And really sweet, funny, big-hearted guy. Needy, and wildly attractive. Thank you.
I'm Angie Schworer, and I play Angie. We believe it's Angie Dickinson.
Yes,
That is her name.
Usually it's just Angie on stage. And I play an old showgirl, old chorus girl with a heart of gold. An old jaded chorus girl with a heart of gold.
I'm Christopher Sieber. I play Trent Oliver, who is a former member of Actors Equity Association. He's a very full of himself, and he is somewhat of someone that he just won't shut up. He went to Juilliard. He graduated Juilliard. He'll let you know he went to Juilliard at every chance he gets. But he also he went to England one time, and he liked the way they sounded. And so he has this weird affectation sometimes where he'll say words that just are a little bit more flowery than necessary. very, very full of himself, but with a very big heart, and also really cute.
It's funny, we all said heart.
I love it. Yeah, totally. Well, that's the one thing, for those of you who haven't seen the show, and of course those of you who have, there is so much heart in this show. That's the biggest thing of everything that happens in the Prom. It all starts with that and ends there. When you were working on these characters, when you first got the script, was there another actor or actress going through your mind, like, I want to throw a bit of them into this?
Not
think you
really. Chris might be able to answer.
I had, yeah. We had the great fortune of knowing these guys before and working with them, and they had. Casey Nicholaw had come to us and said, "Hey, I've got something for you. We don't know what it is, but we wrote it with you in mind, and so so we sat around at his studio and read this script that really didn't have a name yet, and the characters weren't necessarily completely defined, but they were kind of big giant brushstrokes of people, but they knew us well enough so that we could connect with whatever they wrote for us, which is great." So yeah, my character is based on a lot of people, including myself, I think. And there were a couple moments when they would write something, and I go, "Hey." But there were also, I also took some essences, because for me, acting is kind of taking the human zoo. Humans are weird things, and if you take little essences from little behaviors and everything, there are some actors that I did take some things from, and just some ideas, and they're still alive, so that's good. That's good. Yeah.
For you two, anybody?
Not really. Mostly, again, these guys were so generous in the way they wrote the show and trusted us just like they trust each other. We feel that way about each other as actors as well. Just to sort of throw things up and see what sticks, but with them, it's also with great craft and where mine would just be a dumb idea, they could make it into a line, or a song, and so it was mostly, just sort of grabbing things, so to speak, from myself and imagining oneself in the situation that the character is in. Yeah. But it's very close to who I am. Yeah.
I think the same for me. Do you remember the email we got early on that had our character's name and they said, "Think so and so and so"?
Oh,
Brooks.
yeah.
Do you remember that? Yeah. Well, all I remember is that said, "Angie, think you." So I just would think me. But they definitely wrote a much smarter, more political version and more confident version of the real Angie. I will say that.
So for the creators, what was it like working with this group? I mean, creating these roles around them?
Well, they're the best comedians on Broadway. So we could not have a better group of people to write for. Speaking for myself, I come from a discipline of crafting material for actors. So there's no other way that I would want to work. But yeah, they're incredibly generous in the room. And Beth is not here today. Beth is also someone who you can give her anything, and if she's working too hard to make it work, you have to do a better job because she'll give everything to a role. She'll never say, "I wouldn't say this" or anything like that. And I think all of these guys are the same. They're very respectful and very committed, and we feel like equals. We're all working together.
Yeah, I just felt the whole experience. Everybody, like you said, everybody is an equal, and there's just I've never been in a room where there was more laughing during rehearsal. Like we just had so much fun putting it together, and if we had a problem, nobody panicked, nobody got angry. It was always, all right, let's see how we can figure this out, and it always ended up improving. And getting their input, and it's been a real treat and something that I've never really experienced before, just having such generous people to work with.
Chad, for you?
It's more the same. It's great to have this kind of a cast that's so talented but also so open. And I was telling these guys I was working on another show that shall not be named, but when the new pages would come out, the director would turn to me when they were being handed out to the actors, and he would go, "Run, because they're going to come at you, and why is this cut, and why isn't that, I want, and it was just, this is the exact opposite of that. It's, we'll try anything. And it's also been so great to go to them and go, "Why do you think this isn't working? What are you missing here? What do you need here?" And it's just, that's very, very rare, so it's been great.
It's just trust. There's so much trust amongst everybody on the team, on the creative side, and with the actors. It's really been incredibly special.
You are working with one of the most sought-after director-choreographers with Casey Nicholaw. What makes him such a great director?
Well, I think my knee-jerk reaction to that would be basically what we've been talking about. You know, he's a good papa, in a way, to the whole room, and he keeps the ball in the air, and he's not afraid of creativity. You know, some directors are, and not even in a judgmental way. I just think that they get in a place of like, okay, let's bring it in, everybody. That sort of sense, a very teachery kind of thing. Casey is, for the most part, the opposite of that. When things need to come together, they need to come together, and we're all basically adults. But he, you know, he keeps the room at play at all times, and I know for all of us that is a necessity, and it's so appreciated. And he's just got a great sense of humor. He's a nice guy, and he knows what he's doing. He has a great eye, great taste.
I think my thing is that no one knows the mathematics of comedy better than Casey, right? Which is what you were saying, keeping the ball rolling.
Yeah, he was just a cheerleader, and I honestly do not know where he gets his energy, because he is so enthusiastic about the entire project, and this is very close to him too. The show means a lot to Casey. So, you know, he's worked for Disney, and he's, you know, big budget Book of Mormon, all that stuff. But this show is not necessarily a big Broadway splashy like Aladdin. You know, it's a smaller show. But to him, it meant the world. And there were times when, well, there's still times, actually, Casey will be sitting watching the show, and he gets so emotionally, just bursts into tears because he's so happy with it and so touched by it, very emotional. But the cheerleading aspect of it and with the mathematical of comedy, we never, ever questioned him, ever. We just said, yep, absolutely, let's go. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. That was the whole process, which was so great. What we were all talking about is that trust of things. And we would just try stuff, you know, and if it failed, yeah, so what? Moving on. We'll find it. We'll figure it out. But it was always fun. It was like what they were saying is the laughter. Beth put it really well. It was the easiest hard work we've ever done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, you know, what makes a good director is leadership. And you have to understand that in the Broadway community, with the long developmental timelines of each show, a director will be working on several different shows, you know, in a year. And some people, some directors you deal with kind of are like helicopter directors. They just kind of float in. And Casey is not like that. Casey manages to compartmentalize everything he's working on and is totally committed to the project. So there's nothing that appears on stage, in the design, in costumes or anything that he doesn't know about and hasn't pre-approved. Yeah. And that's super important. It's easy to get lost in the chaos of creating something, especially an original show, and you need that person who knows every detail all the time, and Casey is brilliant at that.
And he just has impeccable taste. I think he just really has amazing taste, and nobody knows how to build a musical number better than Casey Nicholaw. And sometimes, you know, we'll write a song, and then we kind of hand it off to him, and he's like, I know how I'm going to stage this, and it just elevates everything. It's really, really thrilling.
One other really crazy thing about Casey that I've seen happen a billion times is that talking about his eye, he will be like, oh, the third chorus girl on the left should be in blue. And we're like, what are you talking about? And then it's like, oh, of course she should have been. Yeah. It's all these, I walked in one day and he's like, look at this orange. And I was like, what? I don't know, it's orange. Like, he's like, this is the wrong orange, right? And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So he has that sort of really brilliant visual sense as well as all the other wonderful attributes.
Yeah. How long was the journey to Broadway with the Prom?
8 years. The idea came in 2010, and we opened in 2018. And it wasn't continuous. The first 4 years of development, you know, everybody had a lot of different things going on, but we always came back to it, and but the outline started quickly. That happened quite quickly. But then we had a full draft around 2013, 2014, and that's when everybody else came on board. And then we really started shaping it. But we'd always been writing it for these folks. Yeah. That's what was great.
We've always been involved.
They didn't know about it.
Beth, Brooks, Angie, and myself have always been with it. Yeah.
We keep
Before they
saying
knew
it was 6 years for us. Is that wrong?
6 or 7 years, something like that.
You knew about it, but we didn't really do it until then.
So you were all from the very beginning.
Yes.
With the cast.
Yes.
How did your characters change, and who was the character who changed the most?
I think the character. I just had one drink. It's not that. I think the character that changed the most was probably Mrs. Green, who's the mother, the PTA head of the PTA in Edgewater, Indiana, played by Courtney Collins brilliantly. Yeah. And I think part of the reason it changed so much is how brilliantly Courtney played it in Atlanta when we did it out of town. All the characters evolved, certainly. And mostly, again, because of the relationships we had set up with each other and the creative team, that, you know, it just sort of mushed together into what it is now. But that character, for me at least, I would say, is the one that changed the most. All of the people in Indiana, all those characters, that whole feel of it, I feel like, changed the most for the better. You know, it really became much more realistic as it went along. That would be my endless answer.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Hawkins as well, as being the representative of the reality of the town. Because coming out of Indiana, we realized that the way the show will work is if there's a sense that a musical is invading a real world. And so we kind of started to turn down the degree of absurdity and of musical theater-ness of the town of Indiana. In Indiana. In fact, when did we change the name? I guess we changed it before Atlanta, didn't we?
I believe so. I think so, yeah.
Anyway, it became a more believable name. And it used to be Heaven, Indiana. Right. So it used to be kind of a musical comedy town, populated in a sense by musical comedy characters. And then and we made a real effort to change that. And Michael Potts coming in and sort of embodying Hawkins really, I think, was the big change for me. He grounded the whole experience. He's such a fantastically good actor. You believe everything he says. He's a wonderful singer too, actually. So that's the character that I think evolved the most from my perspective. Definitely Mrs. Green, but Hawkins as well.
Well, I don't think we need to argue.
We believe you.
But weren't you connected to individual shows or something?
There was a time in the opening.
Oh yeah, the original opening.
The original
number,
opening number we thought was brilliant.
It was. It was funny.
funny.
It was very funny.
Basically, our idea was to see the four of them, or actually not Angie yet, because you came in later, but Beth, Brooks, and Chris. We would see the end of the shows that they were in, and why they were so kind of miserable. And wanted to do something with their lives. And Brooks was Forrest Gump in Gump the Musical.
Thank you.
And Beth was Mama Fratelli in Goonies the Musical. And Chris, you were?
I was Long Day's Journey into Night.
The musical.
Sung in the style of Phantom of the Opera.
So, yes. So basically, we saw the last moments of each show, and you would see their bow, and they would end in a confetti cannon for each of them. So we were like assaulting the audience in the opening
Right away.
number.
Right away.
And what we learned is, and then while they were bowing, they would basically be saying, "I hate my life, I need a drink," and it just kind of got them off on the wrong way. And
it was too much of a heavy note of parody right off the
yes,
top.
it was very kind of bitchy, and it was it wasn't the right tone. So we did it for the very first lab, and then we realized, okay, we're not opening the show right. So that's when we kind of
And even though a
started
lot of
over.
people who work on Broadway are miserable alcoholics, we thought that that's possibly not the most sympathetic way to portray
you're
something.
starring in a show on Broadway. What are you miserable about?
I love that.
But all the buttons were funny because everyone went Gump. Everyone on yours was Goonies, and yours was
Journey.
Confetti cannons.
made me laugh.
It was fun.
hilarious.
It was fun.
It was funny.
It was wrong.
Funny and wrong.
A Life in the Theater by Brooks Ashmanskas.
Exactly. For Bob and Chad, the book is so brilliant. What were the challenges of finding that balance of how you wanted to tell the story? I mean, you just started to talk about it here. Because it's like two musicals, which is really wonderful. It's that fabulous musical comedy world with this group. Then there's that beautiful serious story that all comes together. What were the challenges of finding that?
Well, I think, like we said earlier, trying to make the town real.
Yeah.
I come from a small town in southern Illinois, and it's going through what this town is going through. So a lot of the things that the character of Mr. Hawkins says about the town are actually pulled directly from my town. The only place to work really is the prison. It's hard to get a job there. They've had factories closed down. It's sad. And we were talking about this, and we're like, well, that has to be the reality. And that also, it's not an excuse, but you can see why people in the town are so, sort of on the edge, And I mean, that was a big shift tonally for the show. And then the actors, it's funny because originally they were much meaner and bitchier. And I had, in the song This Poor Girl, I had to change lyrics over and over and over because they were just too mean. So that was a big adjustment too, because we realized, everybody's got to like them. They have to be full of themselves, and hilariously so, but they can't be mean. And so there was a lot of, and it was especially on that song, going back to Beth and going, yeah, what do you think? And she's like, I don't know, it's still mean. So, it was sort of trying to find the balance of being able to laugh at them but also love them.
Yeah, and then there was, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the politics in the United States has changed quite dramatically in the last 8 years. So we had to be very cognizant of that. And part of what started to emerge from the show is like another sort of target of satire is the idea that when things are awful, you feel the desire to be an activist. And these people, although they're opportunistic, they're becoming activists partly to get publicity. They also really want to do something. They just don't, they're just too ignorant to know what to do. And actually the entire, the instigating incident is really randomly finding this girl in Indiana who's going through this situation. So it was just something that we began to tap into, the desire to be an activist, how you identify yourself politically. It became really, really fun to inject specific political references, criticizing the Electoral College. My favorite line in the show that wasn't written by Chad is who are you people? We're liberal
Democrats from Broadway.
It just says so much about the sort of the uninformed arrogance of taking certain political positions. That's really one of the things we were exploring. It's about understanding the point of view of the other person. When we started to embrace the politics and attack it directly, we really began to create arcs for each of the characters, how they could become more informed, more empathetic, and just more enlightened, really, on both sides of the equation.
You all have show-stopping numbers that are brilliant and clearly created for your characters. Would you talk about them? Brooks, talk about Barry going to prom.
Well, it's a gift of a song. Thank you, gentlemen. And the setup of it is that again, in the arc idea here that Bob is talking about, you meet Barry and he's a self-involved person. I think he is the one though that has this sort of underwriting, again, heart, but he really wants to do right. And sometimes it's for his own good or not. And so when they finally get to Indiana, he meets this young lesbian girl. He is immediately struck by her story and also can connect with it. Not just that they're both gay, but that he specifically was not allowed to go to his prom, and certainly in the way he would like to. And he had even had the tux ready and everything. It's very heartbreaking. And so when we get to the point in Act 2 when he gets to go, finally, spoiler alert, he, he's left alone in his hotel room and he's feeling very happy and nostalgic. And they, somehow, in a very short song, really, Chad and Matt put together something that I think on the face of it, you think it was just fun and crazy and he's jumping around. But within it, it's so sad, that, and triumphant finally, that he's able to move on, I think, and learn from a child, as we all need to just be who you are, And I think he really gets exactly what he wants by something as simple as being able to go to a dance. Yeah. And he gets them, and they get him, and it's a lovely, but it's also wildly fun and crazy and energetic and exhausting.
Angie, for you,
Mine's
Zazz.
not exhausting at all. The first time I heard Zazz was Matt Sklar played it for me at his apartment, and I thought, who the hell do I think I am right now with this man and playing this song that he and Chad wrote. Then I got in a room with Casey. We did our little Fosse. I never worked with Fosse, but I have done Chicago, and so I showed him the little Fosse moves that I know. Then he showed me the Fosse moves he knows, and then he put it together into what is Zazz. And really, it's funny that you said being who you are. It's what I'm trying to teach Emma, is to find the inner confidence and Zazz, if you will, to sort of tell her story. And by the end of it, I do, just through Angie's crazy throwing her legs around and doing, but really it's a sweet song, and Caitlin follows what I do, and it's just, it's an honor to do it every night. Thanks, boys.
Yeah. And Chris, for you, Love Thy Neighbor.
Love Thy Neighbor is
Yeah.
quite possibly it's like the greatest gift ever. Thank you, guys. Trent is at a place where he has finally said, you know what, I'm going to go out and talk to the youth of the town and see if I can't just convince them that, you know, not everything's black and white in the Bible, you know, and just because someone's gay and it says so in the Bible is apparently, but there are also other rules, you know, that if you have a tattoo, you're going to hell, and you know if you're lost your virginity before you're married, we're going to stone your family and your friends as well. And it's done in like almost this you got trouble here in Indiana kind of way. And it's this gigantic revival number. And it keeps going higher and higher. And Matthew Sklar one time, because we work out at the same place, he asked me in passing one day, so what's your good money note? What's your good money note? Never tell him. Never tell your friend composer. Because they'll put it in a big Broadway show.
Over and
over again. But it's this fantastic number, and I convinced the town kids to be cool and like listen to each other. It's quite the revival number. It is humongous, and it's the craziest thing because in this show, all four of us have an 11 o'clock number in Act 2, and one after another. Angie has hers, then Beth Level has this thing called The Ladies Improving, which was a song from her the show that made her a star, called Swallow the Moon. and it was called The Ladies Improving. It's a song that made her a star when she was younger. And so she sings this in Act 2, proving to Mr. Hawkins that she is still a good person, and then I have to follow Beth Level, which is always fun because the show stops cold, and then I have to go on and mope on and like, yeah, okay, well, I'll prove myself. And then Brooks has his.
I'm so happy I'm first.
Yeah, and then Brooks gets to come on and stop the show with his number as well. This never happens, by the way. There are no 4 11 o'clock numbers where it just showcases what we do best, and this doesn't happen. So this is the greatest thing ever. But originally the song was a lot longer. Love Thy Neighbor was a lot longer, and I think they cut a section out of it because number one, it was okay, we get it, and number two was I think Christopher's dying, and so they cut this great section. It was like this rap section. It was really great, but it was time to go. And when they cut it, Casey took me aside and he says, "Hey, we're gonna make a little cut in Love Thy Neighbor." And I was like, "Oh, thank God, thank God." He said, "You're not upset?" And I was like, "No, it's okay." Anyway, so that's my number.
You all stop the show. It's so interesting. But the other great thing is there's such an enlightenment to each of your characters during that number. Because like I said, you're all egotistical and narcissistic all during the show. And then you see these numbers. Not only are you doing good for everybody else in the show, it's like, wow, these people are really great people. It's like everything breaks away from yourselves and you see that heart that you talked about earlier. You know, for Matt and for Chad, how did you come up with these numbers for them? Did you write them specifically for this group?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The funny thing is, Zazz is now in the Urban Dictionary, but I was convinced I made it up. So I don't know. But, you know, it was one of the earlier songs, and I said, what if she just sings about having Zazz? And they're like, what's Zazz? And I'm like, you know, that thing when, you know, like you're really cool and you believe in yourself. And they're like, okay, yeah, sure. And we knew we wanted it to be a teaching song to give Emma confidence. And that's how a Fosse girl would teach someone.
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
and when we were doing it, I just wanted to make sure it started with a Candor and Ebb vamp.
Yeah.
You know, so I just really wanted to make sure it sounded authentic, because that's what Angie would dance to.
Yeah.
So I remember we were at a conference room at our producer's office, and when Chad said, "What if it's Zazz?" we were like, "What the hell is Zazz?" And then he just started kind of like, confidence, and I remember playing that vamp, and then just kind of going da, 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 just kind of coming up with the first part of the melody, and then Casey was like, "Oh, I like that," and then we just kind of continued working on it. But we always knew that it was going to be a la John and Fred.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And the crazy thing is, it used to be in the middle of Act 2.
Oh, right.
And after one of our read-throughs, Casey's like, "We got to start Act 2 with Zazz," and we're like,
We were like, what? Because
"You
it's
can't
a
do
small,
that.
it's a
You can't
smallish
start-
number.
There's no way." And like, of course, he was right as always.
He was right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Chris's number is just something that always drives me crazy when people are like quoting the Old Testament and homosexuality and then ignoring all of these other rules, like, divorce, virginity, adultery. Oh, that's fine, even though it says it's, you should be put to death.
Eating pork.
Eating pork, wearing fabric of two different
Tattoos.
threads. And so that just was fun for me because it just drives me insane. And also, you look at the New Testament and the one thing Jesus said is the biggest rule to remember is love thy neighbor. That is the one that is the most important of all. So that was really fun to write. And
Yeah, and we just wanted it to be really upbeat and kind of gospel, kind of live in that world. So it was super fun to write. And then Casey building the dance into it was just so much fun. And then Brooks's number.
Oh, just before we move it, and Trumps.
Oh yeah,
was
trumps them
that-
all.
Right.
Was that
Love thy
word was
neighbor
in the
trumps
song
them all.
long before
Yeah.
anybody.
Yeah, that was like 2014 we wrote it, so
yeah.
it was long before any of that madness.
So there's another resonance. To
I just wanted to comment one time. My brother's, I'm from Minnesota, a small town, and my mother's a minister. She's a big Trump supporter. Fun. Good times. So my brothers and sisters-in-law came to see the show, and my brother Mark said, "Oh, Mom's coming to see the show?" I was like, "Yeah, probably." And he said, And I was like, well, number one, it's all true. And number two, I say Trump 12 times in the song. So she should be happy.
Exactly.
She hasn't seen it yet. I can't wait. I can't wait.
Oh, I can't
It's
wait.
going to be great.
And then Brooks's number used to be, I think, a monologue. I think it was just spoken, and then Casey thought there could be a song in that spot. I thought, but I remember
it might have just been a scene.
Might have just been a scene. Yeah, it was, it was a scene. And then Casey said, "I think there's a song moment here," and we wrote it pretty quickly, from what I remember. I actually was cleaning out my computer, and I found the work tape where that first happened, and it's just. It was music first, so it's just me going bum ba ba da bum ba da bum bum ba, and Casey going, "Oh yeah, I like that." Dun dun. It like just, you could see it kind of giving birth. It was kind of a weird tape to have. I'm gonna send it to you, Brooksy. Yeah. But I think I think the original feel was a little more "She Loves Me." And then it kind of turned into a more of a Carmen Miranda feel, ultimately. But I wanted also to have a bridge that had an emotional section to it. Just making sure that it had the emotional component to it, which I thought was the most important part. So
How early was that?
Was that lab we did?
it was in a
I was
lab.
talking about it recently. It's when they say they wrote it quickly, you got to understand, literally a day or two. They wrote that song, and it really hasn't changed that much. I don't think, maybe a tweak, but not really. They were so in it at that point that they just went boom. And I remember Casey, and it was right before we did that lab, that first one, And Casey and I went into the little room like you did Zazz and just sort of figured it out, and we did something so we could present it. But it was so fast. It's so impressive.
and it has a dance break simply to eat Cheetos, which I love.
Because I was going to talk
That's
to you
what I love.
about energy. It's nonstop, this show, for all of you. Dancing, acting, comedy, everything you do on that stage. What's your pre-show ritual before you hit the stage?
Anyone else can take this question.
I feel like the whole day is always getting yourself ready to do the show at night. For me specifically, I always have to do something physical. because if you've seen the show, I do happen to wear a lace leotard. I shouldn't be doing that at my age, but I am. So there's always a physique or a dance class or something like that for me.
Yeah, I just get there early because I want to hang out with these crazy actors, and the entire company's really fantastic, and we really do genuinely like each other and love each other. And so I just get there early. We just kind of hang out. I'm very quiet, I suppose, and Brooks and I share a dressing room, so we kind of riff off each other for about an hour. And then we just go down and do our show. I just get into it. But yes, you really do have to take care of yourself every day. It's all about getting there and just getting in the right spot. And when we were doing the show, I learned that if you just kind of think about it, it's not one big humongous thing. It's much easier to get through it. I mean, it is a lot, but if you just act one, it ends after this part. And okay, we got this. That's okay. That's all right. And then we have our 11 o'clock numbers in Act 2, and that's where I think most of our anxiety comes from. If there is anxiety, is because we're basically alone out there, and it's our number, and so that's where we're like, we all support each other. Though it's like, how you doing? And we're like, I don't know if it's gonna happen, but we do it, yeah. And after our numbers are over, we're just like, this is great.
Drinking,
smoking.
Never thinking of tomorrow. Look that up.
All right. For you, how?
What do I do?
Yes, what do you do?
I just, I mean, with Chris was saying it correctly. I like to get there somewhat early too, but I just to sort of soak in the energy of the thing. Also, with a piece this well written, you can just trust that it's going to push you along and support you. And I'm a firm believer in not warming up and letting it happen. That's very dangerous and frightening, but that's the way I do it. And I also don't want to know how horrible my voice is feeling that day. I warm up, and if I ever do sort of hum or something in the shower, I'm like, oh, geez, I'm never gonna make it. So I don't like to know. And Sandy, you like to feel the muscles pulling as you start at the beginning.
So your workout
Taste
is
the
show.
blood. Yeah, taste the blood.
Right?
Yeah.
The show is my warm up.
Yeah. No, but you're so limber. I mean, you dance over the beds. I mean, you do so much physical comedy in the show.
Nothing makes me happier than to watch Brooks Ashmanskas dance.
Oh.
It's so joyful. It's so wonderful, and it just comes from
He's
within.
like a Snoopy cartoon. He really is.
Thank you.
Who has the go-to dressing room?
Well, they're small there because it's a
explain to-
playhouse.
yeah,
The
yeah.
Longacre is a smaller theater, backstage especially.
Yeah.
We call it the submarine because
Yes.
there's nowhere to go.
And so it changes the go-to. Chris and I share one, and right below us is Angie and Beth share one in the same. So it's back and forth a lot there.
Yeah.
But usually it's on stage or backstage or, during the scene.
It's interesting because Brooks and I have known each other for 26 years. We did our first Broadway show together that never made it to Broadway called Paper Moon. Yeah, 2 people saw it. Yeah, but
I was one of those 2
Oh
people.
yeah, you saw it. Okay, so we met there. So we've been friends for 26 years, and we have everyone but the principals are 20 years old. And so I don't know, but Brooks and I kind of listen, that's happening. We're the kids. We call them the kids because we can. They come into our room and ask us advice.
Oh.
It's also, and one of them came up to us a couple months ago and said, "Hey, I have to ask you a question. Who's Joel Grey?" And we did not roll our eyes, and we did not go, oh. We was like, well, Brooks, Joel Grey is a Oscar, Grammy, Emmy, Tony Award winning actor.
Yeah.
And we explained who they were. But
Chris is better at it than
They
I
also
am.
come. They also.
I think
they also
I may
come to
have
us-
rolled my eyes.
But they also come
I think
to
I was
us
like, look it up,
with
you idiot.
acting advice, comedy advice, their audition advice, and their agent advice. They come to us all the time, which is really sweet, which is very, very sweet. And also oh my God, we are so old
Yeah,
now.
it makes me feel so young.
Yeah, so young, so young.
And thin.
So Chris keeps the door open, you slam the door, right?
exactly. That's the
We
relationship.
all keep our doors open, actually,
Yeah.
at the Longacre.
Always.
No, but it must be so great with the energy of all of you and all these young kids that are starting out in the business. And it must be great, like you said, they come to you for advice.
Yes, it's really a great group, and the young
Yeah.
people, all that said, they're really so good, and they really try to not sit there on their phones all the time, and it's very impressive, and it gives me a little bit of hope, and I'm inspired by them. They're all so talented. The things that young people have to do now is much more than we had to do. We are very specialized.
just
I almost said
special.
special
We are
people,
special.
where they have to do everything all the time. It's crazy and reprehensible. But it's inspiring, and it's lovely to have your door open and be backstage. I love backstage.
Yeah.
If the four of us are in one dressing room, it's quite something because it's very tight.
Yeah.
And that's where we do our opening scene sometimes, and then our
You told me about that upstairs. They go to your dressing room. Explain to the
Yeah,
audience.
we used to do it a lot more when we were in previews and all the way through for
In
a
Atlanta,
while.
yeah, in Atlanta,
We
yeah.
always would run the lines of the opening scene just to sort of get the whatever energy going, or wake up, in my case. And
we did it for a while here.
yeah, definitely. And then if someone went on last night in Beth's part for the first time, wonderfully, and we met in the dressing room and ran the lines just to make sure she was okay and needed anything. But it is a funny image of, it's literally the size of where Angie and I are. Yeah. And so there's 4 people, and then the wig person came in trying to put on Angie's wig, and
Beth and I keep it very warm, so
it's
these
so
guys are
hot.
in suits, so they're like sweating.
yeah, and Angie's always freezing, which is what it is.
For Bob and Chad, it's like writing 2 different stories. You have all the comedy with this group before that gets into their serious side, and then you have this beautiful love story and this other story about love and hate and all this other stuff happening and people trying to accept everybody. What was it like writing the book together?
Well, again, what you mean together?
Yeah.
No, I think we have a ball writing together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We try
it's-
and make each other crack up.
Yeah.
So, and then
Yeah,
it's Bob does the typing because of the control issue he has. And no, I'm kidding. But he does do the typing, and it's great because I don't want to type. And so I sort of pace around, and then we will just try and top each other if we're doing comedy. And then it's funny, we wrote another show where we sort of cut things up and divided things up at first. But this one has always been, it's never been like, oh, I'll write this scene. It's like, let's sit and talk together. And it's always great when one of us will come up with a punchline and the other one will go, or, and then we'll go, or.
Yeah,
so that's
exactly.
always, it's great. I never want to write a book by myself again because it's usually very, very, lonely and scary. So I love working with Bob, and again, this has been like a fairy tale sort of experience as far as creating the show goes.
I mean, the whole point of collaboration is to create something that you wouldn't create on your own. So I really feel that of all the things we've worked on, what was that?
Just my phone.
Oh, this is the most. I mean, it's an expression of our combined voices more than anything else we've done. And
Yeah.
we've done quite a bit now.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's true, I think.
But it's great. It's great. It's really, really comfortable and wonderful.
For Matt and Chad, what were the easiest songs for you to write, and what were the most challenging? We have a lot of songwriters watching around the world and in the room here today.
Dance with You was the easiest.
Interesting.
I was, my husband at the time was working back and forth between Paris and New York, and I went with him a lot of the time. And so we landed in Paris, and I was really, really like groggy and fell asleep, and then woke up and sort of had this idea and wrote down the lyrics as they are. I don't think they've changed at all.
Not a word has changed. And Chad sent me an email, and he was, he had been up for a while. So I woke up to this email, and I read it, and I immediately just teared up, just reading the words on the page. And I just immediately just ran to the piano and just started working. And I think it was finished that day for the most part. And then we had a meeting and played it for Casey, because Casey was in London doing something. We played it for him over the speakerphone, and I just played and sang it at the piano. And then we didn't hear anything for a second, and that's always scary with Casey, because you want to know what the reaction is right away. And then all of a sudden, he said he was wiping away tears, which was great. And the only thing that changed in the song was we just kind of created a different ending while we were in Atlanta. It used to end very quietly, Casey, while we were in the middle of previews down there, we were in rehearsal one day, and he said, I feel like I want to hear her really soar at the end. I want to hear her sound triumphant at the end. And so we took a little time that afternoon to create that, and that's the version that's playing every night now. But the actual song was done in a day. So that, and then the hardest one was probably the opening number, right?
That or Mr. Hawkins' song.
Oh, Mr. Hawkins. Oh my God.
The principal
Oh my
song
God,
was just and it's so funny because we would come up with something and we would be like, they're gonna love it. And when Matt starts to play it for the director, you can tell Casey's what he's feeling
5 seconds.
Yeah, and so when you sort of see him go, you're
I
like,
like it.
oh God, and then you have to sit through the rest of the song when you know he's hating it.
Yeah, I'm dying
It's the
inside
worst.
playing like, oh, he doesn't like it. Oh no. But there were probably 7 opening numbers and 7 principal songs.
Yeah,
honestly.
it was just brutal. But the character of the principal changed so much that
you had to start over.
That's what it was. It was
that's-
evolving. We didn't know his.
We didn't know what it was. Yeah.
The point,
point of view,
at that
yeah.
story point, exactly what his relationship was with Dee Dee and everything. When we discovered that, you guys were able to.
Yeah,
write
it was
right?
much easier. Yeah.
You mentioned how quickly you wrote Dance With You. What a powerful song that is. What an incredible
thank you.
moment in the show that is. What an anthem that's going to be for so many people around the world. And it's, I've talked to many different composers writing for Broadway before, and some of the most powerful numbers in a show were some of the quickest numbers. I mean,
Just emotion just pours out of you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way it feels like. And it's also, I find when the assignment is right, the songwriting goes quicker. When the assignment is murky, a little unclear, that's when it's just you're kind of flailing your arms just to see what it is. But the assignment for Dance With You was so clear, and we wanted it to be a very simple message. And when Chad sent the words, I was like, this is exactly right. Now I just have to not mess it up and write some nice music to it.
And I think the secret is fly to Paris.
Exactly.
So that's just the.
Fly to Paris.
No, I think in a way because of the jet lag and everything, my inner critic was just too exhausted, so I couldn't sit there and go, I don't know, because that's what I usually do. So it was able to just like, okay, here.
I love the tone and the sound of the music in this show.
Oh, thanks.
Because the kids have their sound, the adults have their sound. They blend in the middle. Was that hard to find, or did it come right away for you, Matt?
I always knew that's what I wanted the result to be.
Yeah.
It did take a while to kind of figure it all out and see, what the sound of each character was. When you're writing for kids, to make them sound more authentic, really wanted to make sure that it was more rhythm driven and that the chord progressions weren't too complex, that kind of thing. And then the Broadway sound, I was a rehearsal pianist for, since I'm 18, so I played a lot of shows, so I got to really pull from a lot of those, my favorite Broadway songs for these guys. But writing for the kids, I think, was a little more challenging for me. But I think I also was able to find a voice in myself that I didn't know I quite had, like with Dance With You and Unruly Heart. Those big songs I've always wanted to write, but I've never really had those opportunities in the shows that I've written. So it was just a great opportunity in this show to just say, I'm going for emotion. I'm just going for emotion and just telling this story and just being as honest and simple as possible. And those moments, I'm thrilled that they seem to be working.
Do you write the music first? Do the lyrics come first? Does it change? How
Changes.
do you two work?
Yeah, if Matt has a tune, then that usually, then it'll be like, okay, great, let me go away and write words to it. Sometimes I will write a lyric and it'll be a dummy lyric, and very rarely will it be like Dance With You, where it's just like, yep, that's it. So usually, the three of us will talk about what the point of the song is, what we're trying to accomplish, hopefully reveal character and push the story forward, and then we'll go away and just sort of, it goes back and forth. But if Matt has a tune that's amazing, then I just go to my apartment and work for.
Yeah, Dance With You was words first. Unruly Heart was music first. So it either way, just whoever is feels like they got something first, we'll go with that.
Do you ever work in the room together?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
I really like to do that. But before we write anything, we really always try to make sure that the assignment is as clear as possible, and we try to outline. I usually try to outline at least one act before digging into the score, just making sure that, all right, this song is this song is this, so you have different tempos and feels, so you don't have 3 ballads back to back.
We have a lot of book writers and composers who'll be watching this. Do you structure the book and where songs will fit in? Because this show is so beautifully crafted, everything about this show, and I know it's evolved over the years. But do you sort of figure out maybe we'll have a scene, now we'll have a song, or does it all shift?
Yeah, we kind of have a system in place at this point.
Yeah.
We start with very broad strokes. We determine whether it's a 1-act or 2-act project and where it divides, and then we sort of sculpt the acts within that 2-act structure. And we go, we start with a beat sheet and go to a treatment and go to an outline, and in that process we're song spotting throughout. But you kind of, as I always say, you're sort of creating the show for every stage of development. Yeah. So you have the outline, then and it grows into a script, and you have a full score, and you sit down at a table, read, this is it, this is great. And it works kind of okay, and then you completely reinvent it for the next stage, and then when you start adding choreography and movement and costume and lighting, and you start dealing with the issues involved with location and set and moving actors from one place to another, it's just constantly reinvented. And really, you don't really see it until previews, which is the crazy, scary thing about this business. But yeah, what was the original question? How do we do work all together and song spot together as well with Casey as well. And when working with Casey, again, he's kind of unique. Not every director is like that. But yeah.
How much of the show changed between previews in New York and opening?
Good question. You guys got a lot of pages, but
Yeah, I mean, but because they had done such great work early on with, I love song spotting. I love that term.
Song spotting.
That's a song, I think.
yes.
What is that?
I don't know. I just think it's an interesting term. I wasn't really listening to him, but no. But because you guys had done such great work, it was always internal changes. The basic structure, especially Act 2, which is stunning, and even on paper, the way Act 2, like Chris was saying, number. On paper, you think, well, that cannot hold, and it always has. Knock wood. But I think the changes were internal.
Well, one of the late changes, I believe, had to do with what I'm talking about, which is staging, which is the overlapping scene content at the 3 or 4 points in the show.
Yeah, that was
so that
huge.
was one of the things. Like, okay, we're dealing with 2 realities, and we have all of this sort of information to get across, and then we had this idea of filleting together and overlapping the 2 realities, and that was one of the changes. It can really only happen when you're staging the show.
And in Act 2, I remember one musical change, because I've done other shows where you literally have to write stuff to cover scene changes and stuff that has to happen backstage that the audience will never see, but oh my God, we need another 90 seconds. We had to do that at the end of, towards the end of the show, the Changing Lives reprise.
Right, the final reprise.
Yeah, the final reprise. There's so much physical production stuff that had to happen that it used to be much shorter. But that's the only thing I think we had to write additional material to cover for the physical production, which is really good, because all the other set changes worked as they were supposed to, which does not always happen. But that's the only big music rewrite that I think we needed to do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it was just shaping and cutting.
Our opening scene, I don't think, changed at all, because that was always the issue down in
Not when we got here.
Once we got here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Once we
Atlanta.
started in previews.
Every day.
In Atlanta, we tried at the
was.
Alliance Theater, and it changed every day. And
Every single day.
Every single day.
I remember Beth had we were doing the show, and we were
Opening
still
song.
changing, and the lyrics changed a lot for the opening number. And I remember Beth. She was like, "Listen, I'm old. I'm putting them in my bra." And so she wrote them down and had them in her bra. And I would have a little section, and then I'd sort of turn and pass it off to her, and I'd see her go, and turn around and start to say sing the lyrics perfectly. Though she always did it. But that was fun.
What is the funniest mishap? Have any of you gone up? What's happened so far during the run? I'd love to ask people, like going to...
Well, Chris, you should tell it. Though.
Okay,
Okay,
so at the end
good
of
one.
my number, Acceptance in Act 1, which is kind of a We Are the World, done really non-equity. And at the end of the number, I have this big note, make rainbow dreams come true, acceptance. And one night I was feeling good, and I thought, I'm going to take that up. I'm going to take that, true, I was going to try, or something like that. And it came out like this, make rainbow dreams come true.
We could play it for you, probably.
It was the worst thing I've ever
It was
heard.
the worst thing that ever came out of my mouth, and it was just like nobody could talk for the next scene.
No eye contact.
No eye contact. We couldn't get through
You
it.
didn't deserve eye contact.
I didn't know. No, I did not.
It's awful.
It was so obvious to the audience why we were laughing, though, so that was fine. But
Terrible.
it was awful.
So confident.
Awful.
That's
That
a
was-
big
yeah.
one. That was great.
That
Now,
was-
you two have to have something, right?
No, but you can't get anything past Brooks. If you
No,
do
no, he
any
won't
little
let
bit
anything
of
go.
stuttering,
He won't let anything
or
go.
you have a little phlegm globule.
Oh yeah, Angie has a line in the beginning where she talks about we want to think about a cause and what's the biggest problem in America today, I'd say, and she says I think it's the Electoral College. It should be abolished, and then we sort of go forward, and Beth's character being somewhat just too self-involved to really know anything, and so she's like, well, what exactly is the Electoral College? And surprisingly, the chorus girl says, well, the Electoral College is blah 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 blah, right? And so Angie had a little little phlegmy phlegm moment. And she said, Beth said, what is it? And she said, well, the Electoral College.
And of
that
course,
bad?
we're all so
It's like-
supportive of each other. We're
Yeah.
just like
Not
start
that bad,
giggling.
But then he just starts laughing through the whole rest of the
Just
line.
well, that's what a human being would do when faced with a monster like that. It's the defense mechanism.
And it's really important that you cut her off. Have you ever let her go on?
I wanted to.
Oh, he did in rehearsal one day.
Because there's a place where you have to cut her off
I'm
and say, all
ready.
right, all right.
I'm ready if he
but
does.
she's figured out an ending to it. He's like, go on, Angie. No, and I've never made any mistakes.
I'm sure you two could fill in his mistakes,
I'm
right?
trying to think, though. Have you had any? You're perfect all the time.
I'm older now. There are moments where, you
Well,
feel
you had your
just
laughing.
your eyes
There was
sort
your
of.
laughing moment. When we were all in the bedroom scene, we all of us were like this.
Oh, because we started thinking about true.
Well, that was
That's
yeah,
what
that was the
happened.
next scene.
We thought we could get over it, but then
No,
it
it was
came back to
something
haunt us
else.
in Act
Oh,
2.
you mean that was that same
He's-
night?
That was
Yeah.
the same night, yeah. Yes, it was the
It's
same
just
night.
Chris ruined everything.
And I'm usually really good at not breaking up at all. I'm usually a
He is.
really
If Chris starts to tremble a little in his voice, we're dead.
They're dead. They're dead. Because well, he's always so solid.
Yeah.
Then it was
Nope.
We started thinking about true.
Oh, it's awful. Should be fired.
So you've never forgotten any of your bits
I
on stage?
always do. And I changed them enough that I.
Oh,
that-
there was also when Chad changed the lyrics in Acceptance to Trent. I don't even know the word, but he's like, try this. Trent would say that. I was like, okay, and I didn't. I couldn't, and I just went bow pa bow pa bow.
Right. Yeah. So Chris really.
I'm really
stinks.
You know what? I'm committed though. I'm committed.
Oh, such a lesson.
What is your favorite moment in the show that someone else does?
Barry's going to prom.
I love the scene towards the end when Mrs. Green and Alyssa have a moment of. It's so brilliant, It's that it's not fully tied up in a pretty bow, but they come to some understanding that the mother is going to try and listen, and that I find that moving every night. I do.
No,
I
I do-
always
I
turn
do
to
too.
Chris actually and Angie. We have to move over here, and I'm always like, oh God, it's just so. It's beautiful and it's so subtle, and in a show that there's sometimes not a lot of subtlety in, but it's so surprising.
Yeah,
and
I agree with that.
fabulous.
That's
I love
one
that.
of my. That's why I love that moment a lot, and it's strangely still moving. We've been doing this for so long, but even in that is one of those moments where it's very real and it's very touching. And like I said, my mom is a minister, and so when I came out to her, it was imagine her zeal and excitement. So that really reflects on, I completely identify with that. But also I like watching, we still will be backstage in the wings watching each other.
Yeah.
I mean, we're true fans of each other, and we really still do watch each other do their amazing work, and it's pretty great. It's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
For the creators, do your favorite moments change when you go back to the show?
It's every night is different. There are certain things that always land, like Angie's "How fucking old do you think I am?" That just it's never gonna not land. Now I've cursed you. I also always get very emotional at the end of Barry's going to the prom because he says, and though it's been years, I might call my mom and tell her that though it's overdue, all of my waiting is over too, and if you're not happy, I'm over you. because Barry is going to prom. And it's like, it always takes me on this little journey of like, oh, he's going to tell her. Oh, no, he doesn't even care. Like, if she can't even get on board, and it's sort of, and the way Brooks does it, I always get choked up because it's just this really quick moment, but you just see his character going through all these things so quickly and changing his mind and going, you know what, it doesn't even matter. So that's one of my favorite moments, too.
Yeah, I honestly don't really get sick of watching the show, and I can't say that about other shows that I've been involved in. I mean, some other shows I've worked on, and I love all of them, but you got your bathroom moments where you go, okay, I'm gonna go, I don't need to see that again. But this show, if I stop by the theater, I don't leave until it's done. And it just feels so satisfying every time. It's really, can't ask for better.
Well, generally speaking, I'm disappointed with the work that they're doing. No, but it's partly about technique. Brooks, I love Brooks on stage because he is always playing the audience. He's always playing the energy in the room, right? Yeah. So the moment when Emma asks you to be her date, and you genuinely react to that and play the rhythms of the audience's reaction to your emotional reaction to that moment. It's also one of my favorite things in terms of tone in the show, because you start to get weepy when you think about what that means, and you say, don't make me cry. And the audience is ahead of you a little bit at that point. And then we completely undercut the emotion of that moment was I look so fat when I cry. So it's a beautiful little moment of performance that's always different every single night. I really, really enjoy watching that. I really love it when an actor connects like that with the energy. It's never just, cookie cutter.
I want to talk about the audience. This musical is changing the way people look at issues step by step. It's really interesting to watch how your show has evolved. Let's talk about meeting the fans at the stage door. I mean, what this story tells you about, there's a young girl who wants to take her girlfriend to the prom, acceptance, people, hate, not understanding, all of this stuff. I mean, talk about best audience moments, meeting them, and how this show has changed their lives and what that means to you.
Well, what's most notable for me is the disparity in ages of the people who are hit by it. And I think it's because of the disparity in ages on stage as well. But the young people, I mean, there's nothing more moving than a young person, a high school or younger girl, boy, whatever, who says, I can't believe I see myself being represented. I get very teary-eyed just even talking about it. And they're affected by it. And who knew? It's so great. Because it can't be the reason why you do something, but it's such a great perk, to have a piece that represents. And then even more movingly, someone who is my age or older who sees it as something that they wish they had when they were in high school. That kills me. These men of a certain age, who couldn't be themselves and see themselves in all of the characters, certainly in Barry, and that's very moving, because there would be no Barry or Brooks, for that matter, or the prom without these men and women who we climbed on top of, and they paved the way for us to tell this story. So obviously, I'm very moved by that.
It's every single performance at the stage door. There is someone who is shaking and crying and telling their story to us. Every single show. And that I've never experienced anything like that. Well, I've never been in a show quite like this either. But the young, I see a lot of younger kids in high school, and they're shaking, and some of them are even just terrified that they're probably not even out in high school, but they saw something that affected them so deeply, and so they're just kind of like, you can tell, but they won't say it, but they're just like, thank you so much, and they're crying. It's just insane. And this is a funny show. I mean, that's the thing. It's a hilarious show, but it strikes a chord with you because it is so real, and the issue is so true.
So many thank you for telling this story. Every night. Thank you for telling this story. And I did get a letter recently of a girl who said, I feel like I listen to Zazz because when I listen to it, it makes me feel like I can overcome any obstacle. So that's, their writing. And, it's all those little things that just add up that you're like, we're doing a great thing here. Thank you to the boys.
For the creators, what it means to you. Perfect, yes.
We just hear all of these stories, and it's funny because we were always really careful. We didn't want it to feel like, an after-school special or that we had some message we were trying to hit home. So, I think it was Bob, was it the woman who was said she was Mrs. Green, or...
Yeah, should I tell this story? So after one of the previews, when we were just sort of discovering the show in Atlanta, we had a talk back, and then this older, mature woman came up to me, and she had her head down, and she just looked so full of shame. And I thought she was angry at first, and then she said, I am Mrs. Green. Like, I was that person. This is so important, this show. You have to continue with this show. And she took me out into the lobby and introduced me to her daughter and her daughter's wife and their daughter. And it was just this little portrait of the story that really we had been portraying. It was such a, an incredible validation of the work. I remember being interviewed when we were doing Elf by this asshole in Canada saying, like, what do you feel about selling out like this, doing, and I was like, selling out? I'm doing Broadway. My point being that we're in a commercial theater enterprise in this great city with these great people, and you can reach a huge potential audience, and the shows that you create are staged again and again by community theaters all over the world. And then one day, this show will be done in high schools. Can you imagine how that will change the lives of kids in high school? Nothing like that could ever have been on stage when I was a kid. So I was so angry at that reporter because, like, why can you not use the commercial stage to that's it, to communicate something important? So I felt like, frankly, we've been doing it,
Beautiful. For the gentleman?
I get emails sometimes, and I've had a lot of people say, thank you for telling this story. Yeah. Thank you for these songs. I play them over and over in my room. I can't talk to my parents. I live in Nebraska. Nobody knows what's going on in my life. And it's really moving to see. And also when we were in Atlanta just trying out the show for the first time, at the same talk back, there was an older gentleman sitting in the back of the house, and we were in front of the stage, and he raised his hand and he said, if I knew what this show was about, I probably wouldn't have come. But I'm really glad I did, and I'm really glad those girls got together in the end. Oh. And that was a moment where I was like, wow, we're hitting on something, because this guy wasn't going to show up. We're in Georgia, and we won him over. And I think that's a really powerful thing that theater can do. And it's, what else can you ask for?
Chad, for you.
I think it sort of what Brooks was saying. When I was in high school, there was no way that I would not in a million years even be out, So to think of the sort of moment at the end of the show when, straight couples, gay couples, lesbian couples all show up at the dance and dance together, and everybody's happy with it and everybody's fine with it. It's just so moving to me because that, it just shows how much the world has changed in, I'm 25, so it's a very short time. So it's all the surgery. No, but it's just sort of every once in a while I'm like, I'm so excited that this is running and people are seeing it and being affected by it, because if that would have existed when I was in high school, I would have been just so happy and thrilled.
Like I said, that's one way you're changing lives. Another way you inched forward was the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Brilliant. I was sitting with my family at home, and they were just wowing, and they said, can we get tickets to this show? Explain to the audience what number you did that day, and that's a first. Another life-changing moment, I would think.
We did the finale of the show, as is, a little cut down, but as is.
Yeah.
And that ended with our two beautiful young girls sharing a kiss at the end. And we were just kind of like, I guess we're gonna do the kiss, because nobody from NBC or Macy's said anything otherwise. So we did the number as is. And when we were rehearsing a couple nights before, you do like a Monday night, late night camera rehearsal. And Casey was, watching the monitors, and he saw it, here it comes. And then at the very end, we saw the two girls kiss, and it was beautifully, it was caught on camera in a beautiful way. And they kind of pushed in on it, they zoomed in on it. And Casey just, he came to us and he said, tears in his eyes, and he said, do you know how many kids are going to see this and how good this is for them? And then, we all sort of realized, wow, this is a big moment. And it ended up being a big moment.
And we have to say that we were ready for a fight. Well, we're gonna do the last number, then they're gonna kiss. There's, Macy's is not gonna, and it was always their intention to do it. And not only that, they zoomed right in, close up, filled the frame. So buy everything at Macy's. That's what I do now.
And we got as we kind of walked away from the performance, actually, the morning of it. First of all, it was 0 degrees, and we were just freezing. It was, they keep you inside the store before you're ready to go out. So My Fair Lady comes off one revolving door, you're going out the other one, and as they open the door, it's like a blast cooler. It's like, it's like jumping into the coldest lake in the world. So we get out there, and you literally run into place, and places, 5, 4, 3, dun, dun, and you're like, what's happening? So we really were, at that moment, we also knew, wow, this is kind of this is going to be cool. And we were so cold, and we were just wanting to not freeze our asses off, so we just wanted to do it and get out of there. And then as we did it, you're waving to the cameras, and the camera pans away, and coming up next is Snoopy, the big inflated balloon. And we all kind of were like, whoo, and we got back into the store, and we're like, holy cow. And cue the conservative media, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it happened. But for every one negative tweet or Instagram or Facebook or whatever, there were 300 per one positive about slapping them back down, and that was awesome to see. That was great.
Beautiful. I remember sitting there just watching that number, and how I could just see how proud you were.
Our phones lit up. I mean, it was like our phones were like, what's that going on? What did he do now?
Yeah, totally. Another step forward with what you did with your show was this past week. Someone tell the audience what happened on Tuesday night when Ryan Murphy, and what happened in your show Tuesday night.
Well, Ryan Murphy, wonderful man, filmmaker, television, impresario, producer, director, writer, really connected with our show. He was also from Indiana. He's a gay man, lived with his grandmother. Very similar story, and he wants to make the Prom into a motion picture that will be a Netflix, sort of like Roma. Let me explain what I mean by that.
Oh yeah, a lot of wide shots, single wide shots.
Like Roma, it will have
homo.
Like Roma, it will have a limited theatrical release and be available for streaming on Netflix. So we get, I know, right? I mean, we haven't begun that process yet, but we're going to be writing the screenplay with Ryan, and he's been incredibly respectful and incredibly generous. But anyway, that night, he bought out the house, and there were
hundreds and hundreds of LGBT kids seeing their from the Hedrick Martin and Glad and Trevor Project. And they were, a lot of them are seeing their first Broadway show.
Yeah.
And it was electric. And Ryan also had a lot of his amazing celebrity friends come join us, like Sarah Jessica Parker and Glenn Close, and I mean it was an amazing night. But watching these kids react to the show was one of the most moving things I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I think it was probably the best night I've ever had in the theater. Like,
Yeah,
it was
it
just,
was.
I've never felt an audience so connected with material on stage before. And these guys were having a great time and doing a great job. And the audience was yelling things out, you know, and it was just a beautiful night.
Yeah, and I just love before, you know, he gave a little speech before the show started, and he said, I'm doing this, you know, I want to celebrate the prom, but I also want to celebrate all you young people out here. Yeah. We see you and we love you. Yeah. And it was just a beautiful night.
Yeah, just to inject, the nice thing was these kids were sitting right next to Glenn Close.
Yeah, they were
next to
amongst
Artist Park.
everybody.
They weren't in the third balcony. They were scattered all in these incredible seats, sitting with all these stars. I mean, he had the cast of Pose there. Everybody under the sun was there. It was one of the most electric nights. But just seeing these kids see themselves, what was it like for you three performing that night?
I never had, before Love Thy Neighbor, my Big Act 2 number, I've never had anybody yell back at the stage before. And it was, I think the line is, well, that's different. One of the kids that I'm trying to kind of convince that, you know, just because it says so doesn't mean it's so. And she said, well, that's different. And all you could hear, all the youngsters out there going, how? How is it different? How is it different? Huh? How? This never happened to me before. So I just, is that? And I just went on. I just, is that? And I just went on. But I was like, wow. And then, but the energy, it was great. It was insanity. And the odd thing, people kept on saying, you guys were on fire. And I was like, no, we weren't. We are doing our 138% every single performance we do. And the audience was on fire for us. Yeah, it was not the other way around. They were on fire for us.
It was just another opening night.
It was just another opening night.
Maybe even better. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. We knew it better. But,
we knew it better.
Said all the lines, I think.
I have a question from someone in the audience. When did you know this was going to be your vocation and that you wanted to do this as a career, either write or be a performer? What was that defining moment for each of you?
Always.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the defining moment. I mean, I used to watch. I saw a lot of theater when I was younger, but I remember seeing when I was really young, like a Fred Astaire movie or something, and I think it was the hilariously titled "The Gay Divorcee." You know that you know I wanted to be Fred Astaire, and that turned out to not ever happen. But you know, just something about that always made me excited. I remember when I was young, I saw Chorus Line, of course, had a big, you know, on all of us, I think, you know, that sense of like, oh, I think I want to do that. And just always have, you know, always. There was nothing else. Where else could I go?
I probably am the same. I just wasn't so cut and dry of like, yes, I'm going to be on Broadway. Right. I just sort of took things as they came to me, and it was just, I always loved to be on stage. I was always a dancer. And somehow it led me here. I don't know how, but I just said yes to everything that came my way and loved what I was doing and was doing what I was passionate about, and that's how I ended up here. I don't think I knew when I was a kid. I just was scrappy and just took everything that came to me and landed here.
I was a fat toad-like boy when I was in second grade. And people used to make fun of me, and I found that humor was the best way to keep the bullies away. And then I would get the whole class laughing, and of course, there's nothing more addictive than laughter, and you're the cause of it. So that it turned into my class clown turned into a Broadway career. But I remember watching the Tony Awards with my mom on CBS back, when I was like maybe 10 years old or 11 years old, and I was like, wow, I want to do that. And then I got involved with theater in community theater and high school and stuff like that. And I had some great teachers that said, they took me aside and they brought me into the teacher's lounge and they said, we're going to have a serious discussion with you. I was like, oh, great. So they said, you have to get out of here. And I said, what? You have to leave this place. This is not for you. You have to leave Minnesota. You have to get out of here. I was like, what? And they helped me find a school in New York, and I went to the American Musical and Dramatic Academy, and then they were right. They were right, and they got me here. But like Angie, I just say yes to everything, and it becomes a problem, actually. Because you say yes to everything, and then you're like, oh, no, I don't have time for that, but I have time for that, but I'll make it work. But, yeah, so yes, and...
Bob, for you.
Well, I grew up in Canada. In Canada, at 15, they give you a test and tell you what you do for a living. And I got a librettist, so I just looked it up, and then such an. Sorry,
15.
I'm sorry, but I will say I was acting and writing ever since I was a kid, and I paid for university as an actor, but it was a super hard life, and I hated not having any control, and I was writing more, started writing television. Anyway, right after college, I said, I can't live this unstable life, and I took a job as an associate editor at a children's book company. And I remember sitting in a room with the editors, and we were looking at an ABC book, like A is for apple or aardvark, and we were talking about what nouns would be associated with what letter. And I just said, I can't do this anymore. And I just said, I'm going to take a vow of poverty. I don't care if I make any money, but I have to write and act. It's the only thing that makes me happy. And once I took the vow of poverty, I started to make money at it, weirdly. And then there's no looking back. But same with me. I just took every opportunity that came along. And I was in television for a long time, then a showrunner, and then, weird Drowsy Chaperone happened, which is another weird story. And then I was suddenly a librettist, and just built on every opportunity that came along. Yes-anding, absolutely.
I started playing piano when I was 2 years old. I started really young. But I never wanted to be just a musician, like do concerts and that kind of thing. I always wanted to be involved in the theater. That's what made me happy. And I grew up in New Jersey, not too far from here, so my parents we would come in once a month and see a matinee, and I would just be like so enamored by anybody walking into a stage door. And I just was like, I want them to let me in a stage door someday. And seriously. And then I was in school shows and that kind of thing. And then I very luckily met Marvin Hamlish when I was 15, and he kind of guided me into how to kind of, how to go about it. Because I said, I want to be a rehearsal pianist or a conductor, but I really want to be a composer. And I basically, I went to NYU and lucked out and ended up subbing keyboards at Les Mis when I was 18. I spent about 12 years as a pit musician doing about 12 Broadway shows. And that's a great way to learn how to write musicals, is to have them in front of you, bar by bar, note by note, word by word for 12 years. And I met Chad when I was 19. So we've been working together now for 26 years. And so while I was working as a musician, we would be writing our shows. And then finally, I decided I wanted to stop doing that and just write. And I had to take the vow of poverty because the pit musician money is not bad. But I knew I would never take that leap unless I took it. So, a few years later, Chad and I finally got our first show to New York, and it's been good ever since. But I've just always wanted to do the theater thing. It's just that the world of theater. I just love theater people. I just love it. There's nothing like it.
I was always, putting on plays in my backyard and that sort of a thing. And then I went to NYU actually for acting. I auditioned and got in, and I have no idea how, because I'm awful. And while I was there, I took this class that was just an elective class on playwriting, but it was being taught by Doug Wright. He was a TA and was teaching the class, and he said, everybody write a scene or whatever. And the next time the class happened, I came in and I had a box, and he's like, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, I wrote an entire play and I made copies for everyone." and so as it went on, at the end of the class, he said, "You really have to think about doing this. You should be a writer." And so he said, "Why don't you get a double major in dramatic writing and drama?" And that's what I did. And then I stayed and I got my master's, and then Matt and I met around the same time, and I was bartending and temping, and we were writing our shows. And so it was just a lot of, it was something I always wanted to do, but it took him to say, what are you doing? You're squandering this. So it was really great that he steered me in the right direction.
Yeah, I find mentors are a huge thing for writers getting into musical theater. Just finding that mentor to just kind of guide you in the right way, because there's no one way to do it, and it's so Marvin and Doug for us really kind of gave us that little push.
This final question is it's only one word. Your show sounds so much fun and so wonderful. If you could sum up your show in one word or an emotion, what would it be for each of you?
Joy.
He stole my word.
Joy.
Passion.
Heaven.
Honestly, I was going to say joy, so I'll have to say joyous because you
Perfect.
screwed with
Yep.
me.
Well, you're the writer.
I would say joy too, but also it's ultimately about love.
Zazz.
There you go.
Well, I want to thank you all from the bottom of
Thank
my heart.
you.
You changed the world through art, and that's something, you go back, Bob, talking about that man up in Canada, that awful interview you had. Look what's happened to your career since then. Look what you've done. Like I said, you changed people's minds. You all changed people's minds and their feelings through art. For those of you who have not seen The Prom, go see The Prom at the Longacre Theater. For those of you who've seen it, see it again.
Yeah.
The Company of The Prom.
Thank you. Thank you.